right, everybody, welcome to NorCal Sports Network. And this is the same hat that Brock Purdy's dad wears. Chat loves it when Marty Lurie comes on.
Anytime you lose a game this time of year, when you can't go backwards, it's a problem.
All right, everybody, welcome on in to NorCal Sports Network. We're going to be talking with the great Ned Colletti tonight, talking some old baseball stories and what's going on with the start of the season. Before we get started, let us thank our sponsor, Chapman Law Group. Chapman Law Group, located in Marin, licensed in all of California. Give Chapman Law Group a call for all your legal needs. You can reach out to them at 415-613. Where did I do with my number here? Just messed it up. There we go. There it is. Chapman Law Group, 415-613-9483. If you got a personal injury situation, give them a call. The call's free. The consultation's free. Let them know NorCal Sports Network sent you. All right, here we go, Ned. Start of the season. We're in full swing. Dodgers look like they're going to go 162.
Oh, I'm sure they'll get beat somewhere along the line, if not just because of boredom.
Oh, boy. Yeah, poor Atlanta. They started off in San Diego, and then they got to go to L.A. Right now, that game is in the top of the A, 6-1 L.A. So looks like L.A. will be 6-0, Atlanta will be 0-5, which is surprising because I got Atlanta being right there, which it's early. I mean, come on, this is
early?
it's a little early. It's a little early. It's a little early. We just had our post-game show. We had a lot of people excited about the Giants' fast start. And, it's nice to see them 3-1 after having a really good spring. And it's carried over into, 3-1, 2-2, 1-3. The one thing I'm looking at is they're playing sound fundamental baseball.
That's a big part of success.
Yeah.
If you can't do the basics, you got no shot, really. I used to tell to our player development people, if we're looking for a player, if a young player doesn't know how to play the game, put talent aside. Because God only gave everybody so much talent. You can refine it, but you got what you got.
Yeah.
But to know how to play the game, you better know how to play the game. Don't send somebody up that doesn't know how to hit and run, doesn't know how to take a secondary lead, if they're a pitcher, doesn't know how to hold a runner. You got to do that. And, what the Giants have showed through 4 games and a good spring is, hey, they're paying attention to detail.
Yeah.
The detail, you got a chance.
Yeah, I like what they're doing. They're doing it with solid, sound pitching, and they're doing it with timely hitting and really good defense. I mean, Chapman just looks like a machine down there at third base. Anything that's near him, he grabs. I mean, even if it's down the line, he gets it, gets up, throws him. I mean, the left side of the infield looks really good. Elliot Ramos looks like a guy that might really be just blossoming right in front of us. He's still young, so. Last year, a lot of people say, prove it to me again. And again, it's early, but he's showing signs of, coming through with big hits. He's stealing bases. And then Wilmer Flores, what can you say? He hit his 3rd home run tonight in 4 games, and he drove in 4 runs. And the Giants got 6 runs tonight with 2 outs, which is really important.
That's key stuff. I like their order. Wade get on track at the top, but really you got, your shortstop, Damas, you got Lee, you got Chapman, Ramos hitting, I think, 5th.
Yeah.
You got a nice little thing going on there. And then when you get something, somebody like Yaz, hitting well down in the order, which he has for, the first few games here. I know you said it's early, but then, and then Flores getting a big night. So, they got the makings of it. They got the makings of a team that's going to compete. Now, who's going to beat the Dodgers?
Yeah.
That's
I
a whole
mean,
other story. But you can't worry about the Dodgers. You got to worry about yourself.
right. That's exactly right. You just worry about yourself. And again, my predictions, who knows? I've been right a couple times the last couple years. This year I have them just missing the playoffs, going like 86 and 76. I think it's a stepping stone year, but anything can happen if you're in it. And if you're in it in late July and management says, "Hey, we're just one, maybe two players away," and they go out and make the deals, then anything can happen. I've seen teams, and you've seen teams that look like, I mean, what was it? I know you weren't with the Giants, but it was the 87 Giants. Al Rosen completely remade them at the trade deadline, and they went from a under 500 team
Yep.
to winning 90 games and winning the division, and really just coming within one game of the World Series, losing in 7 to St. Louis. They were 53 and 55 at one point, and they ended up 91 and 71, something like that.
Yep.
And that was just remaking the club with some tweaks. I mean,
Yep.
we see that all the time in sports.
Well, going back to, I think, my third year with the Giants, it doesn't go back as far as 87, but it goes back to 97. Brian takes over as a GM in that winter of 96, 97. I move up to the AGM. And we had lost in the 90s the year before.
Yeah, 94, 96 games. Yeah.
And the year before that, we lost 90-some games. Nobody thought we'd have a chance. And you know what? We made some moves. We started to gain some momentum, some confidence. And next thing you know, we're winning the division. So
Wow.
I don't expect the Giants to win a division. But I like how they play. I liked how they went about their spring. I like how they're really playing together. And when you have that, as you said, Danny, you never know what's going to happen.
How important, Ned, is the coaching staff to a ball club?
Well, I think it is important. People always argue how many games, wins, or losses is a manager worth. I think your leadership sets the tone. Are they going to have at bats? No. Are they going to make pitches? No. They make the lineup, okay. But I think they set the tone. And I think the game, professional sports is so hard, any sport. Baseball is really hard when you got 162 games in 183 days. And everybody's paid well, and it's tough to keep the focus, and it's tough to continue to pay attention to detail. But if you set that tone as your manager and your coaching staff and your leadership, starting with Buster at the top, it changes things. How many games it's worth? I can't tell you that. But I can tell you, if you don't have that approach, again, you have no chance. Game's too hard.
Wow.
But
what you just said struck me really odd, but it's unbelievable. It's 162 in 183 games or days,
yeah.
And that's including 4 or 5 days off at the All-Star break.
Oh yeah.
Wow. That means you're getting an average of like
sometimes 184, but 183 is
you're getting an average of 2 to 2.5 days off a month, including the All-Star break.
And think of this too: the teams that are playing in the East in either league, they have hour flights. They're an hour away from
everything.
In some cases, their entire division.
Right.
And now think of the NL West or the AL West. Most of those 21 days, half of them at least, they are flying into the Central Time Zone or the Eastern Time Zone. So even that is not necessarily a day off. Giants are home for 10 days. They're going to go to New York. Okay. They play on Sunday afternoon. Monday morning, they're at SFO at 10 o'clock, getting ready to fly to the Big Apple. They're going to get there at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. What kind of off day is that? You're sitting there on a flight for 6 hours, 5 hours. And then you have a dinner, and then the next day you're back at it again.
Well,
so those teams have more challenges than any team.
And I don't think we always, we don't think of what the players' lives are like. I reached out to Casey Schmidt a few days ago on their off day in Cincinnati, just texted him and said, "Hey, Casey, any possibility of doing a recording on Thursday, your off day, 10, 15-minute recording so we can play it on the pregame show Friday on opening day, the home opener. And he got back to me and he said, let me get back to you. That's a day I'll be moving into my apartment. These guys get days off and it's not like, oh, they just sit around and, watch TV. They're busy. It's their one day they can do something with their family, or they're moving, or
yes. It's tough. It really is. Yeah. Do they make a lot of money? Sure. But that doesn't mean they make more time.
Right.
they've got a lot of things to manage all the time. And, I think, and when you think about it, we can sit here and watch John Miller and Kipe and Kruk and Dave Fleming and watch a game and watch the end of the game and turn it off and, talk to our significant other or go to sleep or whatever. They're getting on a flight. They're just not getting emailed to the next city.
Right.
Or in the old days, they're not getting faxed to the next city. They didn't get faxed to Houston or emailed to Houston. They had to fly to Houston.
Right.
Okay. And go through all of that, go through security, get on
Check
the flight,
in
all that, get off the flight, get on is it better and far easier travel than the business person or the family going on vacation? Absolutely. But again, you're working for a living, doing it at the highest level. It's far from easy. I can't tell you how many times I flew over Utah in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Probably 500 times, and anybody else doing this job and on the West Coast, you've flown over Utah many, many times, and you look out and it's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Everybody else is asleep.
Now we're kind of getting into some things we don't really talk about what life is like for the players, but these road trips, I often thought about this, Ned, when I used to do a lot more travel, and I'm not getting the top of the line like the ball players are, but some nights I would sleep good because it was a comfortable bed. Other times my neck would hurt because I didn't have a good pillow. What's it like for these guys that are moving from city to city on a three city road trip? Is that really difficult, or do they just get set types of sleeping situations where they can get the type of mattress that they're used to sleeping on? How does that work?
Well, think about that. Are you going to, if you're going to Houston for 3 days, is somebody going to call the hotel and make sure that how many people in your traveling party that are playing? At least 26.
Right.
That they all got everything tailored to what is the most comfortable for them? No, it doesn't.
Well, I don't mean individually, but do they get the same type of bed on each city, or is it a different?
Well, they all get a single room and they get whatever they get. And some guys have suites in their contracts that are getting a bigger place and, little, higher tariff, so to speak, higher place. But
yeah, I know a lot of chains, bigger chains, they'll sometimes carry the same type of.
It varies, and the hotels are all good and they're all high end.
Yeah.
But again, it doesn't mean that it's easy.
Right.
Doesn't mean, because you have the comforts of a Four Seasons or a Ritz-Carlton or places like that you don't have a noisy neighbor, that you're not on the street, that you're not, one of the toughest things for teams going east, starting in New York. Think about this. For years, teams, and I don't know if they still do, they stayed at the Grand Hyatt on 42nd Street. Okay. So you fly in your off day, you get there, you try to go to sleep because you're working nights. You go to sleep in San Francisco or LA. It's 1 a.m, 1:30 a.m. After games, you're all keyed up, whether you're in the executive box or whether you're in the lineup. And, it takes you a while to go to sleep. So it's 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, what time is that in New York? That's
4:35 o'clock. Yeah.
And you think the streets in New York are quiet?
Right.
You stir 3 or 4 hours into your sleep and you hear, car horns going and people slamming doors because everybody else in the hotel is, gone to sleep at midnight. And
Oh,
so you got to
I know
adjust.
that trip. It's awful. I used to live in Connecticut, and when I moved to Arizona, I had clients that I had to see several times a year, and I would go back, and I'd get to Connecticut, and same situation. I couldn't sleep, and then it was like
Yep.
4 or 5 in the morning, and then I'd have to get up at 8:30 because I'd got to go to somebody's. I got to go see my clients, and then it's like, oh my goodness, and then you get back home a couple days later, and you're just wiped out. Imagine trying to face a 97 mile per hour, fastball, and oh my goodness, and then these. Speaking of pitching, um, the prized free agent this offseason, the pitching was Roki Sasaki, and he's had a little bit of a struggle. Part of it's he's young and he's not fully developed yet. Other parts, it's a different country. It's getting used to the new culture. And then it's also a little bit of a different ball, different grip. What do you do with that as a organization? And you see a young kid who looks like he's a teenager sometimes when you look at his face, and he's got to be just, feeling pressure like, hey, I got to go out and perform. What do you do with a youngster like that? Do you try to pull him in with his interpreter and just see where he's at in his head?
You have to give people a time to adjust.
Yeah.
It's no different than in anybody who's listening in their career. They start a new job. You got to have a chance to adjust to it. I think, I can't remember the exact detail to it. Let's take somebody else from Japan, a young pitcher, Yamamoto, a year ago, okay? Comes in with the highest contract of anybody in the Dodgers organization, more than Clayton. His contract earned him more as someone who never pitched in the big leagues as much as Clayton has earned during his illustrious Hall of Fame career. And if you look at, I think, his first couple of starts, not very good, a little bit of a struggle. Then he gets hurt for a long period of time. Then you look at the end of the season, and you look in the last couple of months. I think it was 7-2 or so, and hardly anybody could hit him. So it's like they say, it's a baseball season. It's not a baseball month.
Right.
I think you just gotta prepare for it and know it's going to take some time. And there's nothing wrong with that. And this kid's going to be great. Not everybody would have wanted him had he been, just another player.
Right. Now,
Yamamoto, I think his first start.
Oh, he gave up a ton of runs in Korea, I think.
Yeah, I think he gave up. I don't even know if he made it through 2 innings.
I don't think he did in Korea.
And everybody's like, "Oh, geez, what's up with this guy? All that money, this guy can't get through the second inning." Well, you know what? It's not everything is done. Not everything is done immediately.
Now, Now, if you're a Atlanta Braves fan, you're 0-5. Didn't the Giants your first year at
we lost to the beginning.
Pac Bell, didn't you lose your first 5 home games?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Kevin Elster came in and had 3 home runs opening day off Woody.
Yeah.
We were wondering what was going on. The Braves are a good team. Alex Antropoulos has done a great job there. They're really, really well run. But again, as we said at the outset of the show, it's so very early. I think almost everybody in their lineup is hitting under 200. Is that going to last? Is Riley going to hit under 200? Is Olsen going to hit under 200? Is Harris II going to hit under 200? On and on. Albies going to hit under 200. Ozuna going to hit under 200? No. So, there's the team, San Diego, good team. Dodgers, obviously, a great team. They're catching Atlanta at the right time.
Right.
Nothing more you can say. They're catching them at the right time.
Yeah, teams go through these crazy streaks, like you mentioned, Ned. If you actually look here at the Atlanta Braves lineup, what guys are hitting? There it is. Harris 158, Riley 111, Olson 143, Azuna 167, Albies 167, their catcher 067, Kalenic 188.
There's nobody hitting 200 on the team.
Nobody's hitting 200.
I mean, I know you're a little bit of a gambling man. You like to make a wager here or there. I'm going to take the entire lineup. Okay. And for whatever you want to wager, I'm going to say they're all hitting at least 200 when the season's over. You want to take that bet?
Oh, no way. I no way. Because I think they're all hitting 200 probably by the end of May.
Oh gosh, I'd say by 10 more days.
Yeah, there might be one or two under 200, but
maybe.
But yeah, this team's going to hit. I mean, yeah, I got Olson and Ozuna on my fantasy team. I think they're yeah.
You might be the kiss of death.
But I got a couple Dodgers too. I got Freeman and Teoscar this year. So yeah. So we'll see where this thing goes. But right now, if you guys are interested in that game that's still going, it's 6-1 and it's about over. It's the ninth inning. So yeah. So that is the story down in LA. But now are you in the LA area right now? Or are you off this week? Did you get a little rain over there this morning? I heard
little drizzle.
Okay. Yeah. I thought maybe the ball might, doesn't carry as much when it's kind of overcast, but what'd you think, Ned, of the Yankees this weekend and the talk of the torpedo bat and them hitting 3 home runs in 3 pitches off poor Nestor Cortez? What a welcome back.
Oh yeah.
After giving up the game
slam
1 home run to Freddie Freeman with 2 out in the bottom of the 9th in game 1 of the World Series.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, all the equipment's approved by MLB, and I got to believe that MLB approved this bat and the type of bat. I don't think that anybody's, there's no way to sneak anything past anybody.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. It's quite impressive, and I don't think that it'll. We'll see if it holds up. But it's they're off to a good start, at least in the home run department.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a question for you, and I don't live up in the Bay. I know that you're in another place too, but I'd like to if there's fans out there that are A's fans or have seen what it's like playing in Sacramento, what the feeling is on that.
We do have some guys in the chat that live up in Sacramento. I don't know if they're in here right now, but I know senior softball games has been tried to get tickets tonight to get on the lawn, but they were sold out. He went early this morning. They're going to fill that stadium up every night because it only holds like 14,000 total. But that game is, oh, wow. It's 16-3 Cubs in the bottom of the 7th. Ouch.
Oh, torpedo bats.
Wow. A lot of scoring tonight. Kansas City beat Milwaukee 11-1. Milwaukee's not doing well right now. 0-4 and getting beat badly. It's one thing to be 0-4 and play well, but it's another thing to be 0-4 and giving up over 10 runs a game.
Again, you got to let it sort out. I refused. The blessing and the curse of baseball is you play almost every day. So you're thinking about it every day and kind of evaluating it every day. But I would always wait till early May to let things sort out, to let things work their way out, settle in, and see what you got at that point in time. Give everybody a month, a few days off. But
hey,
Give them a
I
month.
look at this, Ned. I always look at the 2019 season when people say, "Oh, it's the or a third into the season, this team's toast." No, the Washington Nationals were 29-31, under 500, and they come back and they win the World Series. And everybody thought they didn't have a chance. But look, I've seen teams. I mean, you look at the three World Series championships the San Francisco Giants won. None of them were expected. None of them were like,
No.
"Oh, this is the favorite going into the season. This is the favorite going into the playoffs. This is the favorite going down the stretch in September." Nobody picked them. So anything can happen in baseball. It's why we love it. I mean, it is probably, I would say, the way the playoff format is now, the very toughest to get through the whole playoffs and win a championship. Then,
Yep.
it
is hard. I mean, it's relentless.
It really is. And this is why you see the celebration. I mean, everybody celebrates, right? You win a Super Bowl, you celebrate. You win an NBA championship or a Stanley Cup, you celebrate. Baseball and hockey are brutal because the playoff is so, you got to go. There's no buys in the NHL, right? You got to go through 3 rounds just to get to the cup finals. And then you got to win that. And the physicality that you go through in a season. I mean, all sports are tough, but baseball, to me, you mentioned 162 in about 183 days. I mean, think about that. You're going out and you get 21, 22 days roughly off a full season.
Yep.
And football, you're home every week.
Oh yeah. Till Friday.
Yeah.
And then for eight weekends, you're gone.
Right. And that's it. Baseball, you're gone half the year.
Well, think how many. The team that loses 100 games this year in Major League Baseball, they will play 200 plus games.
Yeah, with spring training.
Yeah. Whether they're exhibition or not, I know there's a massive difference, but you're still getting ready. You still got a game. You still got to prepare. Your managers and your coaches don't get, off days, don't get spring training off days. Sometimes they got 2 games in one day. They got a day-night doubleheader. So, there's no sport like it because even the worst of your teams, even the teams that struggle are going to play 200 games.
Right. And you can, it's interesting because team unity, you build team unity, but I think of the 70s A's team that had fisticuffs often in the clubhouse.
Yep.
Is how common, Ned, after spending 6 months with somebody every day, how common is it for there to be in the clubhouse, whether it's blows or it's just verbal altercations? How common is that?
Well, I don't think there's a lot of physical fights.
Mm-hmm.
That's rare, but not everybody gets along with everybody. That's part of the challenge of the sport, because again, we go back to the number of games and the number of travel days, especially West Coast teams have. You're with somebody who you may disagree with on whatever topic. For 100 and you go to spring training too for another 60 days, say. So you got 183 plus another 60. You got 240 days where you're probably not going to see somebody for 10 of them.
Mm.
Even people, who work Monday through Friday, they don't like somebody, they don't get along with somebody they work with. They still got the weekend for the most part, not to have to hang out with somebody that they'd rather not hang out with.
Right.
In sports, you don't have that opportunity.
Yeah. So. Now, whose job is it, Ned, in baseball, if you've got I don't want to without naming anybody's names, obviously we're not going to talk about individual players, but if there's, for lack of a better word, a malcontent in the clubhouse, is it the manager that, or does the general manager have to get involved, or sometimes how does that work?
Mainly the players get involved and sort it out, or if it gets to the manager. If it gets to the GM, it's really, really gone too far. So, you try to stay away from those situations. That's not a good thing.
Right.
So you have other people that are, in the leadership spot that, hey, you depend on them to figure out what's going on and where they're at, and to remedy the issues, because you're going to have them from time to time. There's no way around it. But that doesn't mean that you don't try to figure it out, and to figure it out to the benefit of the group.
Yeah. Interesting. When you were in the game, you were with the Cubs in the.
Well, here you go again. When I was in the game, go ahead.
Yeah, with the Cubs, that was 80s, right? And then 90s
yep.
and the first part of this century with the Giants, 2000 to 2005, I think. You left in
I was with the Giants from November of 94 through November of 05.
Okay. How much has the game changed from when you were, actively managing or over a team to where it is today? And do you think that the changes are for the, do you think the game's better today, or do you think it was more, more popular or more enjoyable back in the, let's say, 90s and early 2000s?
I don't know. I think, the world's changed. People's attention spans are less. They don't want to sit there. And we've talked about pace of game, time of game. A lot of things have changed. The revenues have changed and ownership levels magnificently passed along to the players. A lot of that has changed. Your season is still 162 games. You've got more playoff teams, which I think is good. When I first started, you had 4 divisions, and there was no wild card. There were 4 teams that won divisions, and they went to the playoffs. Look at the 93 Giants that won 103 games and went home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of things have changed, and, I don't know. The game is still robust. It's still got millions of people watching it, millions of people paying to go see it. So, how bad could it be?
Yeah.
It's become far more international. When I first started, there were hardly any players from Asia, hardly any. Masanori Murakami pitched for the Giants for my career, but there were hardly any players from Asia. Now you have a healthy Asian population that's really making their mark on the industry. Look at what the Dodgers just did in Japan, and the revenue created for that, and the interest that was created with that. There were not many players from Latin America when I first started. And look how many, not only players you have, but star players that you have. So, the game has become global. It's not necessarily the NBA on a global network, because you need, basketball, you could just practice by yourself and shoot. Tough to do that with baseball. I guess you get a pitching machine and hit, or throw a ball up against a wall, but it's not the same. So you need more people to play the game than the NBA. The NBA has done a phenomenal job with their globalization, and baseball is not too far away from it, and even hockey is not too far away from it. When there was just 6 NHL teams, there was one player from the United States, Tommy Williams, and he lived at the top of Minnesota. Everybody else was Canadian, but there wasn't anybody from Finland or Sweden or Russia or Czechoslovakia or Slovenia. Slovakia. There was nobody from there playing.
Right.
So
now, when you finished up with the Dodgers, I'm looking at this question here. There was no DH back then, right?
Not in the National League, only if you played in the American League ballpark.
Right. So what do you think of this comment? Dallas, who's a kind of a traditionalist, I believe. He says adding the DH really screwed up the game. The strategy of baseball is completely different now. The game is not better. Is his take. What do you think of that? I always thought it was exciting to me growing up with the no DH in the National League, and they had it in the American League. Then you had American League umpires and you had National League umpires, and they wore different. Some wore the chest protector, others wore the big guard.
American League wore red, I think, and
yeah,
and wore blue, I think.
Yeah. It was just I don't know. It was kind of it was interesting. It made the World Series to me. It was all, but I was younger, and so everything seems different when you are younger. But it seemed like there was more like it was kind of like the old AFL versus the NFL in the Super Bowl for the. But you know, I see his point because I never played baseball. We never had the DH, so we learned, you know, a lot of sacrifice bunts when the pitcher came up, or sometimes you'd walk a guy intentionally in a close game just to see if the guy would get that pitcher that get him out of the game because you can't hit him. And so you wanted to make him pinch hit, or we're going to get this pitcher most likely get him out. Sometimes you had pitchers hit, you know, Madison Bumgarner hit 2 home runs on opening day. You had a pitcher, I believe, back in the 60s. I'm trying to remember his name, but I think he hit 2 grand slams in 1 inning for Atlanta.
Tony Cloninger.
That's it. Yeah, Tony Cloninger. I think my brother was at the game. It was against San Francisco, wasn't it?
I think you're right.
Yeah, he said he was at the game. He's like 5 years older than me, and but you know, you get those things. And I understand it's different, and the game's never going to go back to that. You know, it's not. Things usually never go back. They just keep evolving. Where do you think can happen 10 years from now? Do you see anything where the game could actually change in the future, that they do something that, I mean, I would have never, let me put it this way. If you told me when I was playing, one day you're going to get to, if the game goes extra innings, you're going to start a man on second, and, you know, and you're going to only have 15 seconds to throw the ball. And, you know, we're not have a pitcher hit. We're going to have somebody else come in and, you know, take his place. I mean, what's next?
I have no idea. I want to go back to the DH question, though, that one of your listeners sent in. From a fan perspective, I agree that I would much rather have a pitcher in the 9th spot. I think it changes the game so drastically. And I think, you know, your strategies are so much different. So from a fan standpoint, I wish there was no DH. And I know there's been great DHs, you know, Martinez up in Seattle and Big Papi and on and on. But, you know, I wish there wasn't a DH if I'm a fan. But I remember sitting in a Arizona little get together during spring training with a lot of other GMs, and I had just signed Zach Greinke and Hyun-Jin Ryu, and had Clayton obviously in the prime of a phenomenal career. And this was another National League GM who had been in the American League and had the DH. And, you know, he says, what do you think? You know, we're talking about the DH. And I said, well, I don't know really if I like that, you know, the DH. I like the strategy and this and that. And he looked at me and he says, so you just signed Zach for 140 some million. You signed Hyun-Jin Ryu for whatever that was, 50 million, or, you know, and you've got Clayton about to be signed for 213 million. And you want them at the plate, and you want somebody to run a fastball in on their hand and break their hand or break a finger. And the reason you have them is not for their offense, but for their pitching. And so now you've got a starting pitcher that's unavailable to you because they were in the batter's box. And as I thought about that, I thought, you know what? Yeah, he's right. You know, and all of them could hit. All 3 of those guys could swing it a little bit, but that was beside the point. You know, you didn't want to put them in harm's way. And so my answer to the question on the DH is, and there's another good point there about the double switch and things. From a fan perspective, I wish there was never a DH. From an executive position, I understand it. And
Yeah,
from a
makes
union
sense.
perspective, I really understand it because, find me a DH that's not making decent money. So you've taken really maybe the 25th, 26th man on the roster today, back in the day, 25, who are making maybe league minimum or nowhere near the average. And you've replaced them with a Martinez or with a Big Papi or
Nelson Cruz.
Yeah, or even Ohtani last year. He won the
Yeah.
MVP as a DH.
Right.
So he has Tommy John surgery or something close to it for the second time. Is he even getting signed by anybody for the contract he got signed for? If there wasn't that type of situation,
Yeah.
probably not. Probably one of
probably
those
not.
deals where you sign him, short money the first year, and you sign him for a second year, hoping he comes back to pitch. He still hasn't thrown a pitch. But
Right.
he's still the most valuable player in the game,
Yeah.
either at the cash register or on the field. Still the most valuable player in the game, and has yet to play a minute of defense in the team he plays for. So
Right.
is that bad? I don't know. I don't think so, especially from my perspective. But from a
Right.
fan's perspective, yeah, I can see. That's one of the big changes in the game is the strategy, because he's right. When to bunt, when to double switch, pull a starter early because you need. It's a tight game and you got to run around second base and the pitcher's due up. What are you going to do? You're going to pull the pitcher and get to your bullpen, or you're going to let the pitcher hit and maybe miss out on the only chance you're going to have. Those were great strategies. That was a
Yes.
great part of the game.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. The pitchers, not only that, had to run the bases, maybe
And
slide.
that's another point. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aaron lost. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right on.
Yeah. Greinke could actually, Aaron says Greinke could hit pretty decently for a pitcher. Yeah. He wasn't a bad hitter. Yeah.
Yes, he could. He could pick it up too. Him
Yeah.
and Greg Maddux were probably the two best guys I saw on a daily basis. They both
Yeah.
had really, really clean deliveries, knew how to pitch, didn't have to pitch at the end of their careers with velocity only, and they could swing the bat and they could run the bases and they could field their position. Greg Maddux, I'm not sure how many Gold Gloves he won, but he won plenty.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a great fielding pitcher.
And think about it. Who's closer to the hitter, except for the catcher who's in foul territory, than the pitcher?
Yeah. Right. Well, a lot of times when these kids were in high school, these great pitchers in high school were some of the best hitters on the team too. They weren't just pitchers. Now they're getting more specialized today because for a pitcher, we talked about it, I think a week or so ago, for a pitcher to actually go to that next level, colleges want to see the velocity. And, so guys are saying, okay, I got to focus on my, building up my arm strength and get it so I can get to that level. We're not seeing these guys. I mean, who's the guy that, the guy like Kyle Hendricks, the guy that can, doesn't look like he would break a pane of glass, but he's been had a pretty good major league career because he spots the ball. He knows how to pitch. A lot of guys today, they're just throwing. I think pitching is going to start coming back more. I really do. I believe that players, we're seeing Jacob deGrom just the other day. He threw 5 shutout innings, but the Rangers have said, we'd rather have you pitch 25 games throwing 97 than 8 or 10 games throwing 101 because, that is just too hard on the arm. I think it was a few years back when they were both with the Mets, deGrom and Syndergaard had a kind of a contest, like said, let's see who could throw the hardest for every pitch. They're just going to go out and fire it as hard as they can. Well, that doesn't work in the long run, and we see that.
No.
So, yeah, I was impressed tonight with Jordan Hicks, the Giants. He threw 6 innings, gave up only 1 hit, threw 72 pitches, 51 for strikes. That's just what you want out of a guy who's, trying to get back and become a starter. And, I thought it was a great outing. We're seeing a lot of things right now. It's funny because we're seeing some pitchers really shut down teams, and then other teams are just blowing out guys. And I want to ask you this, Ned, because pitching is really been. It's the key to winning championships, and a lot of teams just don't have enough pitching. Baseball's talking about expansion. Is there enough pitchers to expand 2 more teams and have 26 more pitchers in the game?
I don't think so. It doesn't mean that they're not going to expand or that they shouldn't expand. You look at a third of the teams, they don't have 5 major league starting pitchers.
Right.
And another 6 weeks in, another 10 teams won't have 5 major league starting pitchers.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where you're going to find it. I don't know where you're going to find it. Which is another thought on the Dodgers, because they have, as of today, and Gonsolin threw great tonight, been hurt off and on through his career, but phenomenal when he's healthy. They have built up, quote, the surplus of young pitching, both veteran pitchers and young pitchers. Yamamoto, Sasaki, talked about them a couple minutes ago. So if in the next 4 or 5 years there's expansion, there's another place where they perhaps could be ahead of the game. So, it's interesting, but without the pitching, you can't win. And you're right. Most people just look at velocity.
Yeah.
A guy like Greg Maddux would probably never get drafted where he got drafted. And that was with Chicago when he became a professional. Probably would have never been drafted throwing, as the type of body he had, the velocity was probably low 90s, maybe low 90s as a high school kid. Genius, even then as a pitcher. But today, would anybody look at that? Or would they just say, what's the velocity? How hard does the guy throw?
Yeah.
How many times do you hear, how hard does he throw?
Right.
Every scoreboard in the country, every major league team, minor league team probably, they show you the velo every day, every pitch. It used to be rare. Some ballparks had them, some ballparks didn't. But now, find a place that doesn't have it.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. Hey, NorCal Sports Live. I grew up with a Casper's hot dogs directly in front of my house, literally about 300 feet from my house, right off Clayton Road in Concord. There was a Casper's hot dog, and it was wonderful. Go down, get a couple of hot dogs. My mom give me a few bucks. That's all it cost back then. Get a few bucks and some chips for like 5, 3 hot dogs and some chips for $5. Oh my goodness.
And I'm going to tell everybody how, they're going to know how old I am right now when I tell this story. Huge Cub fan as a kid, huge baseball fan. When I was 15, 16 years old, my dad was a factory guy, didn't make a lot. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, worked her tail off, keeping us together and things. But to go to Wrigley Field, and I would go probably 40 times a year, and I would have to take a train and 2 buses to get there, and a bus coming home, or my father would pick me up at the end of the line on Addison Street. 8300 Addison, the ballpark's at 1060, I think, West Addison. So like 73 blocks on the bus. But my point is, if I got $3 to go to a game, that was the limit. There were days I would go to the ballpark with $2 because the Coke was a quarter, the hot dog was a quarter, The bleachers at Wrigley Field, and people are going to go, "What is this guy, like a dinosaur? This guy to be doing this from a museum," you know. The bleachers when I first started going were 60 cents, and then they
Wow.
went up to 75 cents, and then they went up to $1, and then there was a big outcry when they went up to $3. I'm not sure what a Wrigley Field bleacher seat goes for today, but
Wow.
you talk about Casper's hot dogs, which sadly I'm not familiar with. I don't know if that's an East Bay thing or a
Yeah,
peninsula.
more of an East Bay type thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, that was the deal. I used to have to sneak on the CTA bus to get home sometime because I was out of dough. If I only had $2 to get there and back and buy a ticket and get something to eat or something to drink on a 95-degree humidity day and heat day, I have to sneak on the back of the bus on the CTA to go to get back to the end of the line. Great days, though. God, I saw so many
Wow.
great players. I saw I saw Mays, I saw Aaron, I saw the great Cubs, William Saddlebanks, saw
Oh
great
yeah.
pitching, Jenkins, Bob Gibson, Juan Marichal, Gaylord Perry, Koufax, Strides. I mean, on and on and on. I had the greatest time. I loved it.
Yeah. I love
Always had bleachers.
those names you mentioned. Come when I was growing up, we had I always forget the name of the board, but you had a little card, and you
Oh,
stick the little.
Stratomatic.
It was kind of like Stratomatic, but you stick the card in and you
Yeah.
spin, and a 1 was a home run and a 10 was a K, and you'd spin it around. You had a pitcher in there, and they'd pitch, and it was always. But I remember Ron Santo. He had a
Yep.
nice big home run profile, and Ernie Banks and all those guys you mentioned. That was great. I got to show you guys something. This is kind of funny because this is where I grew up. This house right here by my little cursor here. Can you see that house right there?
Yeah.
That's 3408 Del Charo Way. This is Casper's right here. I just
Oh,
would
goodness.
walk right here. Casper's hot dogs right here. And then this building right here was where I used to work. I used to walk through this lot, go in the back door. This is Barney's Hickory Pit, a great barbecue store. So my first job was doing the kitchen and cleaning up after they closed the joint down. I had to clean the grill with pickle juice and scrub it, go clean the
They should
front.
be sponsoring your show.
That's right. Barney's Hickory Pit. It was a great place. But yeah, Casper's hot dog. Those were pretty good. They had a little snap to them. You'd bite into it and there was a little snap. It just kind of but I'm sure the Chicago hot dogs are pretty darn good too. We had a couple of guys in Los and Will Martinez and Aaron, who asked the question here, and Will's brother Cliff all went on a road trip last year to the Cubs. Flew out together. I was going to go, but was not able to make it that particular week that they were going. But it's a fun trip. Now Lou, who is you've been on the show with Lou, and he's a regular on here. Lou is going
season ticket holder.
Yeah, and he is going to the Masters this next week, and because his company that he works for, they put together big VIP passes for corporate, people who want to go to the Masters, and then he's going from the Masters to the Cubs. Giants play the Cubs the right after the Masters on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So that's a nice road trip for him. But he's really good friends with, can't remember, maybe if Lou's in here, he can mention it, but somebody who owns a big bar. Cubby. What's it called? Cubby?
Cubby Bear?
Cubby Bear. Yeah, he's friends with the owner of that. So, yeah, I believe it's the Cubby Bear. Yeah. So the season is underway. We've got the Dodgers 6-0. Do they break the all-time record, or do they just put it on cruise control at some point and just get their 100 wins and win the division?
I don't think they're worried about records like that. I think they want to win a World Series. I think they have the long view. I don't think you're going to see any starting pitching with more than 160 innings or so.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think they spread it out. I think their vision is World Series. Break records, yeah, it's cool, but there's nothing like winning a World Series. And Giant fans know what that is like. It's been a little while now, but you won every other year
Yeah.
for a few years. There's nothing better than that. So that's where it's at. I don't think that they'll. I
Okay.
don't think they'll take. If they have a chance to do it, yeah, they'll go for it. But they're not going to sacrifice anybody to
Yeah.
get.
We got a couple of questions here for you, Ned. Cliff says he's curious. What is your favorite pizza spot in Chicago for deep dish?
Oh wow. I don't know. Maybe Pizzeria Uno. I'm not a big deep dish guy.
Oh, okay. Thin
it's
crust?
better.
Okay. Okay. And then we've got another question here from Senior softball games. What is your favorite stadium to watch a ball game at?
Well, except for Candlestick, I've been blessed to work in three of the best. Wrigley Field, which is my first ballpark, so that will always be my favorite. Oracle Field, Pac Bell Park, SBC Park, AT&T Park, loved it. I mean, it was such a cool experience to see it come out of the ground and go over there with Sage as they were building it and see the skeleton of a tremendous stadium. And Dodger Stadium. I mean, Dodger Stadium is breathtaking when you think about where it sits in downtown LA. And it's almost like you're in a park when you look out in the outfield. It might be the and somebody, I feel free to correct me on this. It might be the only stadium that doesn't have buildings in the outfield or isn't enclosed. Maybe Oracle Field is close, but you got some scenery out there. You got the Bay Bridge and you got the bay and things out there. I mean, that's phenomenal too. But when you think of stadiums, you either see neighborhoods or you see the stadium wrap around like Candlestick did and like all those cookie cutter ballparks that were built in the 60s were Three River Stadium, Busch Stadium, Riverfront Stadium. They were all Veteran Stadium, all kind of look the same from the inside.
I imagine you've been to all of them, right?
I've been to all of them, but Florida,
Okay.
it's not really a new stadium anymore in Miami. I have not been to that stadium.
Did you ever go to Jerry Park in Montreal?
I went to visit Jerry Park. Jerry Park was Expos already in the Olympic Stadium when I started. But I went to visit it, historic spot in the city there, not too far from downtown.
Will Montreal ever get a baseball team again, you think? I
don't know. It's a tricky situation because of the Canadian dollar. I think this is my opinion. I miss it. I miss going there. I loved going there. The fan base. If you looked up attendance records and you looked at how the Expos drew during Felipe Alou's managerial career, really, and even before that, they outdrew many teams. They outdrew Pittsburgh. They outdrew the Giants with Candlestick. They outdrew maybe Milwaukee. They outdrew all sorts of franchises in the States. And then, the Olympic Stadium was not necessarily a great place to watch a game. But I mean, I can remember being into where there were 50,000 people in there. Easy to get to. You took the subway there. But to answer your question, I think what I thought when Tampa was kind of floundering as far as what they were going to do, and I guess there might still be in that period of time where they don't know if they're going to get a new ballpark or what they're going to do with the current one. I mean, right now we've got two major league teams playing in minor league stadiums, one the A's, one the Rays. But I thought if they had moved to Montreal, again, it's a big if because you need a stadium. They don't necessarily have a ballpark to play in. Somebody's going to have to build a ballpark, finance a ballpark. and all of that, which they almost did right near the Bell Center, which is downtown Montreal. Would have been smaller place, maybe 32,000, 33,000 seats, somewhere in that neighborhood to keep the tickets at a little bit of a premium. If you move Tampa to the American League, I mean, they're an American League East team, but think of the draw of the Yankees and the Montreal Rays. Every time the Yankees would play in Montreal, the ballpark would be packed. Every time the Blue Jays played there, the ballpark would be packed. Every time the Red Sox would play there, the ballpark would be packed. So you'd have 30 to 40 games immediately sold out with big time fan bases making the trip up there. Plus,
Wow.
it's a great baseball town. That's the city that Jackie Robinson played in before he came to
That's
Brooklyn.
right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. I
It's got
remember
a
that.
great baseball history.
Yeah.
I miss it. I was sad when they left.
Let me ask you this, and we'll close it out here. Can you think of in the last, let's see, it was in the 70s. So let's go last 50 years, a trio of better homegrown outfielders than Warren Cromartie, Ellis Valentine, and Andre Dawson. Dawson, Hall of Famer. The other two were excellent players, but they were all homegrown and they all came up about the same time.
You are right on. That organization was one of the best for a long period of time of developing their own players. Drafting international signs, they were the best. And they put together great teams. In Felipe Alou's office in San Francisco, when we were, I was there at the same time with him for most of it. As I recall, there were pictures in that office, and it was a big office. There were pictures in that office of his family, his two baseball playing brothers, Jesus and Mateo, Matty,
Yeah.
and a picture of the '94 Expos.
Yeah, team right there. Yeah.
Which he said were, maybe the greatest team he's ever been around. And as you look, if you saw that team picture, you'd see a lot of the players, they came right from that farm system.
Yeah.
They were one of the best, and they did it generationally. They just didn't do it one time.
Yeah.
They had their homegrown players replacing their homegrown players.
Yeah, these three guys right here, Grissom, Walker, and Moises Alou. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
They did a phenomenal job. I happened to see Moises about a month ago in San Diego camp.
Yeah. Wasn't Gary Carter
Oh yeah,
homegrown expo too? Yeah.
LA.
You saw Moises?
I did. It was great to see him, and
Wow.
we took a picture and sent it to Felipe. I have so much respect for the Alou family. Felipe Alou is one of the probably, I did 40 years in, I shouldn't say I did, it's not like I was in prison. I worked 40 years in the game, blessed to do it. And I don't know how many people I met through 40 years in the same industry, but Felipe Alou is in my top 10 of people I met. And our conversations were so phenomenal. A lot of baseball conversations, but so many life conversations. Just really, really so much respect for him. And his son Moises played 1 year for us in San Francisco,
That's right.
and it was great to see him. I hadn't seen him for a handful of years.
Yeah, poor kind of what a lot of people remember Moises for was the catch that wasn't with Steve Bartman.
Yeah.
The Cubs.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. But crazy how things happen. Poor guy. I mean, the guy, at least they brought him back in 26. They won the World Series in 2016 and all was kind of forgotten, I guess.
Yep.
But,
another guy too that is remembered for something that, is really unfair to his career is Billy Buckner.
Yeah, exactly.
He's remembered for, the ground ball that Mookie Wilson hit that went between his legs under his glove.
Yeah.
He had almost 2,800 hits.
Yeah, I know. He's borderline Hall of Famer.
Oh yeah. And Oh, Bill Buckner. Oh yeah, it's unfair how sometimes how sports.
At least he had a good attitude about it. I don't know if you ever saw the Seinfeld. No, was it the Seinfeld or was it the guy that created Saturday Night Live? Drawing a blank. He was doing a thing out on the street, and somebody said, "Hey, Buckner," and he was having a good nature about it. It was a clip. In fact, I recently saw it. Last question before we get out of here comes from Cliff Martinez, a big hockey fan, big Sharks fan, actually. Says, hockey question for Ned. The Sharks made a decision to move Zetterlund for, I'll probably mispronounce this, Ostapchuk, and a second round. Other than his size, what are some of the other qualities for Ostapchuk, and why move restricted free agent Zetterlund?
Well, there's some positions in hockey you cannot win without having really great players in those positions. One of them is obviously your goaltender, and Mike Greer made an excellent deal with Nashville over the summer to fill that spot. Probably a year or so from now. And you need scorers, you need good centers and good wingers, but you also need somebody who's got some size to him and some grit to him to be your 3C, to be your third line center. People don't necessarily look at that as a big deal, but it's a huge thing. And most teams that win the cup, when you look at what really makes them different, is certainly their goaltending, but really the bottom six of their forward line. And this kid can play. This kid is still young. He's got he's just really getting started. And it's when guys like him start to really play, you can't get them. They're not available. And so you're going to have to draft and hopefully develop somebody like that. He's already on his way to being that type of player. So, it looks a little bit, you're trading somebody that's got some pizzazz to him, and Zetterlund, an offensive player, but you're also getting a player who plays a position in a way that he plays it that is tough to fill.
Great.
It's tough to fill.
All right. Cliff says, thank you, Ned. Appreciate the answer and insight. With that, we will call it a night, guys. Baseball's on the way. Giants are 3-1. It's a good start, better than 1-3. It's a long season, but as I've said, the beginning of the season, whether they win or lose, they're going to be more entertaining and more pleasant to watch this year. And that, as a fan, you want them to win, but only one team can win. So as long as they're playing baseball that is entertaining and is good brand of baseball, I'm happy because they're heading in the right direction. So
I second that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cliff.
Yeah.
Thanks,
all right, guys. We will be back tomorrow night after the Giants-Astros game, right about 7:45-ish. Until then, we appreciate you guys being here. Take care, everybody.